Hi, this is Tim Santoni and welcome to Santoni's Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by Mahyar Ghassemian. Mahyar, thanks so much for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, maybe give our viewers a little bit of sense about you, your company, your history, and kind of what led you to this path. Have your own law practice, specialty in construction and contracts, but maybe give our viewers a sense of your kind of historical path, what got you to where you are today.
Okay, so the law was a second career for me. I have a master's in physics, and I taught for a while at Cal State Long Beach, and then I got into the corporate world, and that led me into law school. Three torturous years, but it was fun. I graduated past the bars, and then was looking for a job. Stumbled upon this firm that represented some national construction companies in construction defect lawsuits, and they wanted someone with a science background who could understand what the experts say and how to be able to translate that to layman's terms. Also, they wanted someone who would look at plans and numbers and not get all upset about it. So I enjoyed the fact that it brought in a little bit of my background. So I started with the firm, and we were representing national companies. Turner, Whiting Turner, these are contracting companies that are building airports, really big. Turner is involved in the RAMS project right now. And from then on, there were times where we started representing some other businesses, not just construction companies, business litigation, and that involves contractual disputes, partnership disputes, and stuff like that. So I've been doing those two together. Back in October of 2010, I decided to start my own practice, and that's how Ghassemian Law Group got started. And we've been going pretty strong for the past 8.5 years. Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's great to hear. So when you're working with businesses, and especially in the construction space, maybe give us a sense of the top maybe one or two or even three things that you see that they're typically doing wrong that exposes them to a significant amount of liability.
One thing that is extremely important is that if they have a corporation, an LLC, whatever, to make sure that everything is okay with that. Corporate formalities are kept. Just because you set up a corporation in 1979 does not mean that it is active and going well. That's for smaller corporations. Larger corporations have those issues under control. So a lot of contractual problems we see, contracts that are either not done properly, they allocate too much risk to one side or another. So we routinely draft contracts, review contracts between parties to make sure that they are properly balanced, because if they're not balanced, then the court is going to kick them out and say, no, you were trying to get too strict with your own client and tip the everything towards your client, tip the balance of the case, and so they do not appreciate that. So that's the contract issues. Reading contracts, having an attorney advise you in that. Those are important things.
Gotcha. So the fact that you've been in litigation working with big and small companies helps you better kind of assess the fairness of those contracts, it sounds like, because it doesn't matter. I mean, you can draft anything on paper, but how is it going to hold up in litigation or before a court or a judge, right, is the most important thing.
Absolutely. When you've been in litigation and you've seen one little paragraph of a contract talked about ad nauseum for half a day, it kind of sticks in your mind, and you write it so you avoid that kind of issue.
Well, and also too, that experience is what you and your team bring to the client, is that expertise to help them to avoid that thing. They may not understand why that's important, and nor do they need to, but they need to understand that this is something that's valuable when you're working with someone's expertise in a field such as yours.
Correct. And California is what we call the four corners of the contract state. The contract defines the duties and responsibilities and rights of the parties. Very few times can you bring verbal or other type of evidence, and usually it's the contract. That's
So if
the
it's
most
not written in
important
there, it's
thing.
not going to fly, is what you're saying?
It might, but it takes a whole lot more effort because you need to have everything written down and properly documented. And when you go to court, for instance, one of the questions I get asked a lot is that verbal contracts are valid in California, aren't they? So what that I don't have a written contract? And the response is, whose story are you going to believe? It's not that people lie, but people have different recollections of events and things that they promise. So one piece of free advice I give people, small businesses or whoever is out on the field, you make a handshake deal with someone, just go back and send them a text or an email that says, hey, just to confirm this is what we talked about. And believe me, that goes a long way in preserving your rights.
Interesting. So in your practice, maybe give a client story or one of your favorite clients that you worked with recently that illustrates kind of your expertise and kind of things you bring to the table when working with a client.
Okay, well, I'll talk about a litigation matter and a non-litigation matter. A litigation matter, we're involved representing some shareholders in a shareholder dispute case. So it's a corporation, the majority shareholder, just every time he needed money, he borrowed and he sold shares. And finally couldn't pay those, and now there's a big dispute going on. Our firm is representing 200 minority shareholders, and they're stuck. They are absolutely stuck in this lawsuit because once a lawsuit is filed, either you have to defend yourself or you're exposing yourself to liability. And so unless you go bankrupt, you have to understand that there are lawsuits out there in California. Anybody can go ahead and file a lawsuit. So that's one. Another one, which is a good planning type. This person is starting a new company. He's a highly paid executive in a company. He just quit his job. He wants to start a competitor. And very knowledgeable person. So not only are we setting up the company for them, but we're also helping them get licensed because they're going to be contractors licensed. Issues involved there, so we're getting them licensed in California. And on top of that, we are doing some agreements between the partners to make sure that if something happens and one of them wants to leave, the other ones don't get stuck, or something happens to one person, so they call those buy-sell agreements. We also are helping them with their construction contracts. So these two types of contracts, one with owners and one with subcontractors, because they're going to have other subcontractors come in and do portions of the work. So that's like a package that we're doing for them, and it will set them in the right path.
Gotcha. So in your practice, you're on a day-to-day basis, you're kind of intimately involved with the client's business because you're seeing the types of people they're working with, the subcontractors, the potential liability, kind of how that impacts the owners and from a business planning perspective, and also trying to make sure their corporation is kind of assembled properly. And I assume that the corporation part of it that you mentioned early on is because typically when there's a lawsuit or exposure, that the first thing they try to do is kind of separate or penetrate the corporate veil and go after it and show that this isn't really a company, and try and then the whole purpose of the corporation is defeated because now there's liability on the owners.
Correct. And the reason I branched from construction into business is that all construction companies are businesses.
Right.
So you need to help them. Now, we know what we do and we do it right, but if it has to deal with franchising, if it has to deal with large M&A and things like that, we refer them out to our colleagues.
Okay.
But we do the skeleton of it, and we keep an eye on them, keeping them away from trouble.
Sure. So I know that besides running your practice, you're involved in bar association, Inns of Court. Maybe share a little bit about your, how you give back and mentorship, as I know that you do a lot of that.
I have a knack for getting myself into more than I should. Every time I go back to my office, my assistant asks me, so what else did you get yourself into? I have been a chair of the Orange County Bar Association Solo and Small Firm section, a great section for attorneys, solo practitioners, as well as a lot of small firms up to 10, 15 attorneys to come together. Inns of court are old institutions of judges and attorneys that get together once a month and discuss ethical issues. And contrary to popular belief, attorneys do need to be concerned with ethics quite a bit.
That's good to know.
Right. So I was, there's 5 of them in Orange County. I was president of Peter M. Elliott Inn of Court, not last year, the year before. I'm also legal counsel to the National Association of Women Business Owners in Orange County, the Orange County chapter. I've been a member there and work with them. We also have an attorney group within Noble, which is really nice that we get together once a month. And so there's a lot of other things, you know, some philanthropic matters, but these are mostly volunteer. I'm also on the board of the Associated General Contractors of America, the California and Orange County division of it. It's the largest association of contractors to make sure that all laws and legislation that comes out is going to be something that's business friendly, that's contractor construction friendly. So that's a couple other things like that.
So,
I won't get into
it doesn't sound like you have a ton of free time, but on a personal side, when you're not running your practice and dealing with all these other organizations, where do you like to spend your free time?
Well, my kids are grown, but they still want to hang around. So we spend time with the kids, with my family, very family oriented. I love working out, and I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but I love the beach. I love to go to the beach. It's one of the perks of living in Southern California. Right. I read a lot. I love to read. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Mahyar, thanks for coming on the show. We'll make sure that we link up all of your information. If you want to connect with Mahyar, her information will be down in the description below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll make sure that we get back to you. Again, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks.